Okay. Still in chapter 3. The next couple parts here, these are the major food groups that we have inside of our dietary guidance system. What in the world is a dietary guidance system? Well, a dietary guidance system is just a food guide, okay? My plate, my pyramid. It's how we convey, how we translate all these dietary reference intakes, these DRIs, and put them into a way that anybody can easily make sure that they have the requisite amount of fruits, vegetables, protein, dairy, all that stuff. That's what a food guidance system really is. And like I said, it's evolved over the years, and I have some examples of those, and I'll point some of those out. But these are the ones here that I'm pointing out, these major food groups. These are the ones that we have now in our food guide, okay? Our My Plate. These are the 5 groups: grains, dairy, fruit, vegetables, and then this weird thing called protein-rich foods. And these pretty much these are pretty much the same parts and pieces that we've seen in food guides since literally the beginning. In this version, it has altered a little bit in that protein-rich foods. They used to be just, meat, poultry, eggs, nuts, everything that had some kind of protein component into them. Now they've just called protein-rich foods. So now it's up to you to figure out what is a protein-rich food. And we'll point out some of that stuff as we kind of go on here throughout the next few. In everything, when we talk about all of these various different food groups, I give, some examples here and there, but really understanding that I'm not going to ask you to regurgitate every single food example for all of these food groups in there. But I do want you to understand that pick a couple that you like, remember them. Me asking on an exam, what are the major food groups, and give me an example, are some things that, excuse me, that I would potentially ask on an exam as an essay question, all right? So again, knowing 2 or 3 of these various different types of foods within each food group, is important to know. Variety is key. Why do we want variety? Well, this just shows you an example. If you're somebody who always ate apples and doesn't eat anything else fruit related, you can see, that's a huge difference between vitamin C found in apples and vitamin C found within oranges. There's a huge difference there. Okay, so this is why you want to choose a variety within each food group. They just provide a slightly different nutritional profile. Okay, I'm not saying apples are less nutritious than oranges. I'm just saying it gives you slightly less of certain vitamins and minerals. That's why you want to choose variety when it comes to your food choices. So the first group we have here are grains. Okay, and these are examples of grains: wheat, rice, oats, corn, the various different ancient grains. They're called ancient because they haven't changed since the beginning, okay? Some of them have, we've manipulated some of them, therefore they're not called ancient grains anymore, all right? What are primarily found in grains? Carbs. Fantastic, great source for carbohydrates are your grains. Protein. These are the 2 macros that are found within grains. These are the 2 hugest amounts of macros that we find in this food group. Now, we want to make sure that we eat a vast majority of our grains as whole grains. And I think I have that maybe on another slide coming up here, all right? The vast majority of the grains that we get here, that most Americans consume, I guess I should say, here in the States, have been processed. So for these, the vast majority of the grains that we consume usually are enriched or fortified. What's the difference between those? Because it is something that I do ask in a number of different formats. And it's something that we do talk about through the first few units here when we talk about examples of foods where we find these macros, vitamins, minerals, all that fun stuff. The difference between enrichment and fortification are basically what I'm underlining right there. Enrichment is the replacement of these nutrients because they've been removed during the food processing. There are a number of examples. There are a number of vitamins and minerals, and those are some of the more common ones. A number of various different B vitamins. Iron is a mineral that usually gets enriched. When we process grains, and they'll do it for a number of different reasons, but when they process the grains, during that process of how we get them ready in certain situations, these are going to be vitamins and minerals that are lost, okay, because of that processing, manufacturing process that occurs. And so we add them back. That's what enriches. So we replace what's been lost during the process. Fortification, they never had them there to begin with. So when we fortify something, it's not there. It was never there. It was never originally found in the food, and we've added to it to help boost its nutritional value. Calcium, added to orange juice. Vitamin A or vitamin D, added to milk. Those are some of the more common ones we see for fortification. You'll see it with a lot of white breads as well, because they're very processed. And so you'll see a lot of enrichment and fortification with those. There it is. I do want you to know maybe an example, okay, and I've given some examples. All right. I do want you to know how much of that food group you should consume each day. Those are questions that I ask. Sometimes it's multiple choice, sometimes it's matching, but I do ask that potential question on the exam, so now you know. When we choose grains, you want to choose whole grains. At least half of your grains should be whole in nature. What does that mean? It can be intact, ground, cracked, flake seeds of cereal grains. That's how it will be represented on the label. Whole grains have the bran, the germ, the endosperm, and I'll talk about that more in the next unit, okay? When it's refined, we lose some of that stuff. And again, I'll talk about that more in the next unit. But we need 3 to 8 ounces of grains each day. At least half of those grains should be whole grains. These are just minimums to do stuff. If you're going to be active, exercise, do a lot of extra work, have a very labor-intensive job, all right, the amounts are going to go up. I get it. All right, but these are just the requisite amounts just to maintain status quo, doing nothing. Dairy foods, as you might imagine, milk and anything derived from milk. Yogurt, hard cheeses, that is everything. Now, in some of our older kind of food guides, they did spell it all out. Here, they don't. They assume you're smart enough, even though the vast majority of Americans probably don't consume very many of some of these different food groups at all, some of these food groups. So we should probably spell it out a little bit more, but I'll point that out when we see some of these older kind of food guides. But that is what dairy is, milk and all the milk products that come from it, okay? Excellent source of protein, macro, excellent source of phosphorus, which is a mineral, riboflavin, a B vitamin, vitamins A and D, if they are fortified, like we just mentioned. So that, excuse me, that is what we are consuming. That's what we are getting out of these dairy foods. And you should get some dairy in your diet. You need 2 to 3 cups per day. That is how much he is. that is how much we are asking of you to consume each day. As you can kind of see, it can be fortified with soybeans or other types of plant-based foods, almond milks or whatnot. And here's an example, and I'm not going to, I'm not asking you to memorize this thing at all. I'm just showing you there, you know, there's other things that you can do. You don't have to consume milk. You just have to have something that, you know, has the requisite amount of protein, riboflavin, you know, anything that maintains that kind of calcium content within it. And even though this doesn't have the calcium content on it, they are pretty much very similar in a lot of that nutrient profile, as you can kind of see here. I mean, the biggest difference, I mean, a lot more carbs. You can see pretty low in carbs, especially unsweetened almond milk. No added sugars. Lowish in fat. Low in protein. But if you have a nice healthy diet, drinking almond milk, as you can kind of see, really helps to limit some of those excess carbs in your diet. Okay. The nutrient profile is pretty comparable as well. They're all relatively the same. They may be a little bit higher in calcium and vitamin C and whatnot, riboflavin. So there are some subtle differences between them, but again, not on the exam. It's just here to kind of show you the slight little difference that does exist between milk and some of the milk alternatives. This is a concept we'll hit at later in the semester as well, when we look at eating during the first year of life. Next one is protein foods. Again, this one's a little weird because protein is not necessarily a food type. It's really a nutrient that we find a lot of within these food choices. So this is anything meat related, right? Beef, pork, fish, poultry. So this is dark meat. This is light colored meat. It's all protein. Eggs, obviously a very good source of protein. Beans, dry beans are a really good source of protein. Liver, fantastic. If you can consume liver, you pretty much get anything and everything. It's fascinating, the super high nutrient content that is liver. Of course, it's an acquired taste for most. Nuts, tofu, seeds, so a lot of different choices here. Those that are a vegetarian, they don't have to consume any of this stuff up here. Okay, there's a lot of non-meat based sources of protein, and that's probably the thinking behind this naming of this food group. Rich source of iron. You can have both iron in meat sources and non-meat sources. We'll look at that in Unit 3. A vast number of B vitamins there. I've given an example of some: niacin, thiamine, riboflavin, B6. A lot of these are going to make a lot of structures that are necessary for you to do work and do activities within you. It's also a great source of vitamin E, which is an antioxidant. That's awesome and fantastic. Helps you to not look so old. How much should you get? Anywhere between 2 to 6.5 ounces each day. About 6 ounces of protein with each meal is generally considered proper. Fruits are fantastic because they are great in stuff that we tend to not get a lot of as Americans. Potassium, folate, fiber, phytochemicals. They're also very, very low in sodium. They negligible amounts of sodium, which is a nutrient of concern here in the United States. We tend to get above and beyond the requisite amount that we need. Fruit, I imagine you can figure out a fruit, so I didn't really list them down, but what can fruit be? It can be fresh fruit, probably the best. It could be dried, frozen, canned. It's not, as long as it's not in kind of, a syrup, and any type of 100% fruit juice. Those are examples of the highest nutrient content for fruit is in those forms. And again, 1 to 2 cups per day. With fruit, you like to shoot a little bit higher, okay? Because it does provide a good amount of fiber, a lot of nutrients, and not a whole heck of a lot of calories to it. So it'll fill you up. 1 to 2 for fruits. Generally, 1 to 2 is what they suggest for vegetables. I think this book says 1 to 3. Or the USDA's website says 1 to 3, so that's what I put here on it. Again, it's kind of the similar lines here when it comes to vegetables. I imagine you can figure out a vegetable or two. But here, kind of the same thing. Any vegetable, I mean, best fresh, cooked, canned, frozen, dry, dehydrated, 100% vegetable juice. Again, many different forms of this. You don't want it soaking in some kind of syrup. Frozen is pretty good and fantastic. You pop it in the microwave. You can steam it that way anymore. You can put it in a steamer on your stovetop. There's a lot of different ways that you can get your vegetables. Great source of fiber, great source of phytochemicals. Again, nutrients of concern that we tend to not get a lot of here in the States. And a lot of good things. Vitamin C, vitamin A, folate. These are things that are going to help you to see better, to make red blood cells. And we'll talk about all that fun stuff later in the semester. How much should you get? 1 to 3 cups per day. This last kind of food group is not technically on the My Plate. When you see My Plate, it'll have dairy, it'll have fruits, vegetables, okay, protein, grains. You'll have those 5 individuals. This one is not on there for whatever reason. It was on in one incantation of this food guidance system. It is not listed on it now for whatever. But the U.S. Department of Agriculture does recognize that it does contribute nutrients to the diet, and they should be incorporated. What is oil? Well, that's how much you should get a day. Okay, about 5 teaspoons. That's what I want. Oils are liquid at room temperature. These are going to be much more healthier than solids. Solid oils would be fat at room temperature. Liquid fats are oils, and these are much more healthier for you. They're not saturated, they're more unsaturated fats. And that's really what you want to choose. You don't want to choose a high amount of saturated fats. Very evil and detrimental to your long-term health. Great source of essential fatty acids. Great source of vitamin E, again, an antioxidant. Olive oil, probably one of the more better ones. Canola oil, there's a number of them out there. Here's what solid fats are. These are what you want to limit. Okay, they are hard at room temperature. Okay, that's the obvious difference between these 2 types of fats. And these again, are considered unhealthy because they are very high in saturated fats. We'll dive into fats, obviously, a lot more in the next unit. And there are some examples.